60% of what could be called the opportunity gap in the American economy rests right here in California. But the economics aren't the reasons why we're here, right? We're all here because we have a deep and abiding belief in the power of individual kids to transform their own life options if we simply prepare them to do it, right? But we know to do that it's going to take money. It's going to take resources. The premise of this particular conversation is that the power of private dollars has increased in this economy where the public dollars are decreasing. Just the opportunity to impact the thinking of district leaders is humongous. And so this conversation is really geared to help those of us in the room understand really what are the funders saying.
Describe your overarching philosophy about closing the achievement gap.
At the Stone Foundation, we really think closing the achievement gap is a moral and economic imperative. You cannot have a country where there is a 50% graduation rate. In some cities, 7% of African American males graduate, where states plan their prison populations based on third-grade literacy scores, where you are guaranteed a prison cell but not a preschool slot, and where 30% of people ages 30 and up have a BA. So for us, the issue is not even necessarily an achievement gap within this country, it is also a global achievement gap.
What would the world look like if the gaps were closed?
Fundamentally for us, it is about having the challenge, instead of what it currently is, which is we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough skilled workforce, that the paradigm is completely switched. We actually have too many. We got so many skilled individuals being churned out by our schools that we are overrun with talent and capacity.
We're not a funder. There is a commonality, obviously. You put education up there, you put the large streaming sort of issues up there, people agree to those things. But once you go a little deeper, there's a lot of difference. And when you talk about achievement gap, we're getting closer and closer to common measures about achievement gap, but that doesn't mean we have common ideas about how to get there. And so understanding this is understanding how they're approaching it. And so some of the key ways, and you've heard some of it already in the presentations this morning, is about access, is about learning, is about teaching, and is about support. Those are just ways to frame it. The access one is just giving people the opportunity to reach those opportunities and have the same kind of resource access. The learning is about the kids themselves, how they learn and how you actually engage them. The teaching is both about leadership that you've heard, like running the schools and those kinds of things, but also about how the teacher core is developed and the curriculum is developed. And lastly, supports. Eric talked a little bit about that, is around what's the community's role.
Describe the investments that are currently a part of your portfolio that you would consider investing in equity. What do they have in common?
Well, at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we have defined our investment strategy in education specifically as closing the middle school achievement gap in mathematics.
So the kind of investments that we make are, for example, in urban teacher residency programs to create a pipeline of skilled teachers who are trained specifically to work in that school district, understand that reform agenda, and understand the culture of the school. And these people are specifically prepared to work in the most difficult schools with the most challenging students. We fund programs that support teachers as they begin their careers. We fund data-driven inquiry teams at schools, and this is really important. This is the kind of the heart, sort of exemplified by the work that Partners does, but where teachers work together in teams to look at the data about students that are struggling, work together to identify interventions, and continue to refine their work. All of our investments have in common the use of data to drive student achievement, the development of tools and practices that produce outcomes. Schools that have a learner-centered culture, and that's important because when you have a learner-centered culture, the emphasis on how these kids are learning, and teachers then can adjust their practice to reach that goal.
On results, what does a high-level investment in equity look like? How do you measure the value add of your investments in equity? What do you consider sufficient results for your investment? How are you investing in sustainability? What do investments in sustainability look like to you? And how much are you investing in sustainability?
We're trying to make sure that we are funding the infrastructure that will get our kids prepared. And what do we mean by infrastructure? We want to make sure that our teachers are effective teachers. We want to make sure that there's systems built in schools that encourage these continuous learning models, that there's time allocated for, again, as Sandra was saying, professional learning communities, that can get around, the teachers can get around the table, around an assessment, and make sure that their instruction is driven by the results of this assessment. But it's more than anything, making sure that we are building, that we are contributing to learning individuals as teachers, learning institutions in schools, learning institutions in organizations that provide services for out of school. And our newest push, and again, we're trying as a learning institution ourselves, we're seeing that without contributing to making sure that there's family engagement in this process, it's going to be very hard to keep this a sustainable change. But what we want to make sure is that we are building learning institutions at every level that touches the kid.
What do you believe are the next level innovative strategies that will leverage prior and current investments to close the achievement gap?
The value add, and in the way philanthropy is thinking about this, one, they want to be a lever. You heard everyone talk about can't doing it alone, wanting to make sure, they want to instigate, they want to sort of pull other people into the process. Two, they want to provide some kind of research base. They want to be able to have good information so that decisions are being made with real numbers and real understanding. They also want to take risks. They understand that the other sectors may not, especially the public sector, may not be able to take as great a risk. And philanthropy has the opportunity to do that by experimenting and being bold around these issues. And lastly, they want to provide benefit.
But I'm curious, just in terms of the dwindling dollars, now we're constantly trying to lure you to come to funder forums and to hear about the various projects that we're working on. I'm curious how often you guys get together to leverage the dollars that you have and to start thinking about picking and choosing initiatives that have had positive outcomes for kids, so that there is a chunk of change and not, you know, us going to you for a little bit of this and you for a little bit of that.
The incredible silver lining of this budget crisis has been that there's a lot more partnerships going on, not only in the between funders, but also between grantees.
I think this issue of funder collaboration, Hydra, is really big, and it's going to get bigger.
Forums for philanthropy to have conversations exist. So there's Members for Education and a whole host of forums to do that. I would offer quite critically, frankly, that, but those conversations are largely information sharing. They aren't really strategic thinking and planning and how do we align our efforts. I think that's the next level. Unfortunately, many of the public sector funding streams at every level are misinformed.
I worry sometimes that a lot of good work is getting done and it's not getting to Washington.
Right.
And so that's, so let me be clear, I'm always willing to carry the message because, you know, I know that this legislation, which is a huge opportunity to make change, is coming up. And, you know, I think we really have to take what we can learn from what has worked and what hasn't worked, like the restricted funding or other issues that have come up, and really try to inform the conversation.
I know the senators, well, they do a lot of reaching out when they're home. But we're glad, Northern California grantmakers, to host a meeting with funders of education around these very issues. And if it's just one or if it's a couple of them here at the same time, we're glad to sort of help facilitate that happening, of course, with our partners here.
And when would you like to do that?
At their convenience.
Okay, good answer. Well, class, please stand to your feet. And because they've been such a stellar panel, they're doing a lot in terms of decision making, being on the front lines. I think they deserve a standing ovation. So let's acknowledge them.
I hope that you will continue to come to these events as we have them, because they are a great forum for exchanging ideas. Briefly, new leaders. We recruit, train, select, and support tremendous principals to go into low-performing urban schools and change student achievement dramatically, along with partners, along with ed pioneers. We're proving that it can actually be done. And we've actually even partnered in specific schools with partners in school innovation and gotten some great results. So keep coming. We'll keep feeding you lunch.